Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today I want to talk about something that might rub some people up the wrong way. If it does, fair enough. But it comes from a couple of conversations that I had recently, as many of my videos do, where again, I've talked about this before, but especially young women these days are throwing up an awful lot of boundaries for themselves. They're creating many, many more obstacles for themselves by throwing out an awful lot of excuses about being oppressed or about how they don't get paid as much, or how their lives are deliberately made bad by the capitalist patriarchy. And whilst none of this is particularly factually accurate in many instances, and as has been observed, there are numerous investigations that have demonstrated and debunked so many of these things that are brought up by these individuals. A lot of those interfere with the excuses, the limitations, and things that they have imposed on themselves. It shakes their worldview slightly, and it causes them upset. And so, again, I had another individual that I was talking with the other day touch on this, and again, it was how kind of capitalism and the Western world were the worst parts of the world ever for so many different reasons, and it was all straight white males who had done terrible things and all that kind of thing. And firstly, if sorry, I got something in my eye. If all of your argument comes down to something that the other person can't possibly argue against just because it's factual, i.e., you are straight, white, and male, or if it just so happens that the largest demographic within that country happens to be white or whatever else, then that's not something that they can help. In which case, what is it that's actually going on that you are arguing about? Attack the facts, the reality of the situation. Yes, part of the reality of the situation is that these people may very well be white, or they may very well be predominantly straight, or whatever else. But those aren't necessarily things that are impacting the situation. Are they actually in any way attached? Are they in any way connected in some useful way that generate information that can then be analysed and worked with to come to various results? Now, there's a group from what are they called? The Heritage Foundation, Georgetown Institute of Women, Peace and Security, that put out a set of information about how Western capitalist countries are, rather unsurprisingly, the places that are, by and far the best places on the planet to be born and to grow up as women. Where you've got discrimination and things like that are legislated against, kept to a minimum, as best as possible in as many practical ways as they can. And yet these are the places that we are seeing and hearing the largest outcries of how terrible the world is in regards to capitalism, in regards to white people, in regards to whatever else. Now, firstly, none of this really makes any sense anyway, but there was a rather nicely put together article from, what was it, UFM Market Trends, which I'll leave the article down below. But they showcase the information that was found by the Heritage Foundation, which demonstrates in a more numerical fashion, using a set of varied indices, which countries are best for women to live in and to grow in and to be born in and all that kind of thing, simply based on the restrictions, discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws, and various other legislations and things like that, and their effects. And there is rather unsurprisingly an association between kind of the capitalist mindset, where, to be fair, women control an awful lot more of the market because they are the larger spenders in terms of demographics between men and women. But on the first graph that they show in this article, they have the level of economic freedom, which, capitalist, a buyer's market where you've got a lot more freedom to own your own stuff, to buy what you want, rather than it being state controlled, for instance. That stands as being one of the two stats that they are monitoring here, and then the other is the WPS, which is the Women, Peace and Security, I assume, index, which is basically a measure of women's welfare in terms of the law and whatever else, and where the economic freedom is seemingly a percentile. What's the word? The words have gone from my mind, and apparently I can't speak either. But either way, the findings are that countries with a greater level of economic freedom, rather unsurprisingly, also have a much greater level of welfare for women. I'd be interested to see, I mean, granted, this came from an institute specifically for women, peace and security, but I would be interested to see the kind of similar stats put forward for men. And whilst I imagine that they'd be quite similar, I'd be especially interested in regards to then comparing those to kind of the findings from courts, and whether or not it's actually practiced the way that it's suggested. Because we see that for the most part these are fairly well supported and upheld in various areas. As per my experience working in corporate, it's all contract based. Everyone gets the same contract, and so then additional monies one way or the other come down to contribution, work hours, whatever else, duties, and so on, or differing contracts. And those differing contracts tend to be based on who joined the company before a certain date, rather than anything to do with specific work. But then looking at it, you've got the differences between welfare in very capitalist countries versus not particularly capitalist countries, and rather unsurprisingly, there's a substantial decline the less capitalist a country becomes. And again, none of this is surprising at all. None of this makes the anything really stand out as being kind of, yes, the capitalism is destroying the world. In fact, no, socio-capitalist groups that have limits on capitalism but also have a very strong kind of open freedom of the market, they're the ones that do the best. Socio-capitalism is the way that stands forward, because then you do have a welfare state to try and make sure that people are at the very least kind of looked after. But then that welfare state is built on top of by industry, by companies, by things that work. So it's a safety net. It's the underlying foundation of the protections for those citizens that then go and help build on top of it. It's not purely there to as some kind of weird kind of government-controlled utopia, which has been demonstrated not to really work because people are greedy. And it's not these anti-capitalist things where there's a lot less in the way of trade, a lot less in the way of freedom and interaction between kind of consumers and suppliers. But then let's move on to the patriarchy thing, because this is the thing that always gets brought up, and it's daft to me, because patriarchy is a means of governance in many instances. And quite frankly, yes, religion, if you've got a theocracy, then yeah, you're probably right. It is probably, in almost every instance, there are some female-focused religions, but many of them are patriarchal in structure. But we don't have a theocracy, especially not a patriarchal theocracy. We live in a representative democracy in many cases in the Western world, and so the way our legislation is formed, our governing systems in regards to what our governments can do and can't do, are all very much one way. Certain individuals may hold patriarchal views within those structures, but the grand scheme of an entire place isn't that. But then the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security again have another graph in this article whereby you have the Women's Index of Well-being relative to the type of civilization that people live in, as seemingly dictated through the kind of anthropological distinctions between their bits and pieces. And so they had, 19 countries? Yes, 19 countries that stood out predominantly as the best for women, and rather unsurprisingly, Western civilization, marked as Occidental civilization, protects female rights the best, and has much more in the way of prevention of discriminatory laws and social inclusion and increased personal security. And so if you're born in the Western world, then it may not be perfect, but it is the best on earth. Does this mean you shouldn't maybe argue for certain things if you see a problem? No, but it's taking those problems in perspective. And when it comes to, back to my initial point, the people that I was talking to that prompted me to look into this some more and finding this article that I thought was so good, it stands out as being, personally, on a personal level, you cannot use, firstly, in the country that I'm living in, the UK, especially at the moment, you can't start suggesting as a woman that just because you were a woman and the structure of society is evil in some way, that you are horribly disadvantaged, because factually that's just inaccurate. But then moving towards what you can actually do about it, how you can actually improve your life, the first thing you can do is start just looking to be functional. Don't look to make excuses, don't look to explain, look at what you can do to move forward. Even if it's baby steps, if it's something that you want, find your way to get there. Look at it realistically, do your research. Don't just look at ways to gain sympathy from other people. Don't just look at the world and go, it's evil, it's against me, because it's not. The universe doesn't give a shit about you. It doesn't give a shit about anybody. When it comes to these systems that we have created to allow our lives to function more simply than being stuck in caves and having to fight for our lives every day, it comes down to you are in one of the best places to live that you could possibly be. Does that mean that you have absolute freedom? No. But absolute freedom is anarchy, and anarchy often also doesn't do anybody any favours. But you have an awful lot more freedom, an awful lot more control, and an awful lot more reasonable methods by which you can make advancements and have agency in your own life than people in almost anywhere else on the planet. Stop taking it for granted. Stop using it as stop trying to ignore these facts and create excuses. The way to move forward, to progress, to develop is, quite frankly, to get out of your own way, do whatever research, whatever looking into that you need to do, and then progress. Don't make excuses. Take actions. And now I'm sure that I may very well get some flack for this, but again, The actual article will be down in the description there for you guys to peruse as well, where the findings are fairly straightforward. At the very least, on paper, which means if it's on paper, especially in the Western world, where all of our laws and things like that are codified, you can then use them. You can make an effect from them. If you're not seeing that this is the situation in your life, do a bit of reading and then follow up on it. Again, find a way to take action. Don't just make an excuse. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the video later. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you found this at all interesting or useful, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.